And now it's time for Talking Trade, sponsored by Michael Best Strategies and MMAC's World Trade Association. This week's guest is Rebekah Sweeney.
Welcome to another segment of Talking Trade. I'm Ken Wasylik, Managing Director of EM Wasylik Associates, a business development firm.
And I'm Sandi, Siegel, President of ME-Day. Our guest today is Rebekah Sweeney. Rebekah is Senior Director, Programs and Policy at the Wisconsin Cheesemakers Association. Here is where she represents, lobbies, and advocates for the Wisconsin cheese industry. So, Rebekah, with all the trade negotiations and supply chain challenges of the last few years, I imagine you've been seen a lot of strain on the market and been a little bit busy with reacting to all of that. That said, however, all these challenges, we're coming off a record high in 2022 for U.S. dairy exports. So what was that recipe for success last year, and what do you think 2023 holds in store for us?
Well, so good to be with you, Ken and Sandi. I appreciate the opportunity. And you're right, without question, 2022 was an outstanding year for U.S. dairy exports. And we saw total value coming in at $9.6 billion. That represents a 25% increase overall and creates a new record, both in terms of volume and value. And I always like to say, and I really believe, that dairy processors' success is built on a firm foundation of their commitment to quality and safety. But U.S. dairy processors' success in exports also reflects a sustained focus and investments to build relationships and make sales abroad, not just in one market or in one region, but really all around the world. So let's take a look around the world together for a second. To our south in Mexico, they became the first $2 billion export market for U.S. dairy processors in 2022, after sales rose 37% to actually $2.5 billion. So we blew that $2 billion mark right out of the water. In Central America, sales are up 47%, and even further to the south in South America, sales are up 24%. Elsewhere in the world, very key market, Southeast Asia, our sales rose 22%. And looking a little bit closer, sales were up 34% in South Korea, 14% in China, and that's really remarkable given some of the volatility there, and 39% in Japan. Even in Australia and New Zealand, where there's a lot of competition from dairy manufacturers there, U.S. dairy processors saw sales gains of 16%. And in Canada, in spite of remaining friction over the USMCA, dairy sales rose 19%. It's an unmitigated success story, though perhaps one that could have been even greater absent some global disruptions. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, supply shortages, demand, triggered inflation throughout 2022, which limited consumers' purchasing power. And I think that most forecasters predict that's going to continue to limit, to a degree, U.S. dairy export gains in the year ahead. It might be exacerbated by the fact that European processors right now can offer more competitively priced products to their marketplace, given their weaker currency relative to the U.S. dollar, and some improvements in key costs like feed are triggering higher production there, higher milk production. And China continues its reopening process following a few months of COVID lockdowns, and sales there continue to be sort of tenuous. Those complicating factors, among others, have a lot of dairy economists predicting flat or slightly reduced dairy export totals in 2023. For example, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, their outlook for agricultural trade, which is released in November, predicted dairy exports in 2023 totaling $8.9 billion. That'd be a decline of about 2% year over year. So our recipe for success is still very much working. $8.9 billion in dairy exports would still be excellent. Yes. But I think it's unrealistic to expect another year of 25% gains.
And I think that's consistent with a lot of industries. You know, we have this bubble post-COVID, and, last year was an anomaly in so many ways, a good one often, but, hard to compare year over year as we move forward. You touched on it briefly on some of the programming, and I know that's a big part of your role, federal and state programs that are designed to help Wisconsin dairy exporters and support them and secure funds. through the Dairy Business Innovation Alliance and Wisconsin Initiative for Agricultural Exports. So tell us about those programs and how they work.
It's a great time for dairy processors to weigh a launch or an expansion of export endeavors because there's support for them that there has never been before, both at the federal and state level. And I need to thank U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, who has now helped to deliver over $100 million in support for dairy business innovation initiatives. You mentioned that program, Sandy. It's a farm bill program that supports 4 centers across the country that are working to do sort of 3 key things: diversify dairy farm revenues, help dairy processors create new value-added dairy products, and then key to what we're talking about today, enter new global markets. So Wisconsin Cheesemakers Association, together with our partners at the Center for Dairy Research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, they run one of those centers. We run one of those centers and we offer technical assistance and export and import displacement analysis, product development, and also key direct-to-business grants. In the past 4 years, we've awarded $7 million in these grants to 88 dairy businesses in our 11-state region, many of them going to Wisconsin. And we're just about to award another $1.5 million. That money is going to continue to roll out here in the next 3 years. And not all of the grants go to support exports, but it's one of our key focus areas. And I find it just amazing what very small investments can do to spur growth. I want to give one illustrative example. An award of, it was less than $20,000 went to Ellsworth Cooperative Creamery in Ellsworth, Wisconsin, which used funding to develop a new shelf-stable dairy product. It's actually freeze-dried cheese curds. They're crunchy and delicious, and they're selling like hotcakes in Southeast Asia. And then the dairy business innovation initiatives are sort of, they're married with what Wisconsin has chosen to do. And we found some real allies on both sides of the political aisle. Governor Tony Evers first championed a dairy export program in a 2020 special session call. And then the pandemic hit. And when the concept sort of resurfaced, we had champions in Representative Tony Kurtz and Senator Joan Ballweg as well. And that became the Wisconsin Initiative for Agricultural Exports. Unanimous support in both houses of the legislature, which is rare these days. It's a 5-year, $5 million investment designed to boost all ag exports. Half of the monies go to dairy and half is split between crop exports and meat exports. And thus far, those dollars have supported the very small but mighty team at the International Agribusiness Center at the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. And they've also gone to key grant programs that are run by industry. And WCMA has been awarded $150,000 to run a program. And we're using our dollars to deliver free export consultative services and practical workshops, and then also provide $15,000 grants to support exporters' social media and marketing campaigns, shipping and logistics costs, costs related to in-store demonstrations and retail sampling and merchandising, all of those things, very expensive, but this helps. And we're working with 8 dairy processors already, small, mid-sized, couple of large ones, and we have room to help a couple of others. And in addition to that, I also wanted to say that the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, WEDC, also awarded us recently a collaborative market access grant of $150,000. And we're using that to fund direct-to-business grants of $15,000 to support their trade show initiative. So there's really a lot of resources right now that are available.
Yeah.
And a great time for dairy processors to build on success.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. One of our clients is in the agricultural business, and they're exhibiting at Gulf Foods this week.
Right, it's an exciting week. We see there are actually more dairy processors at Gulf Foods this year, I think, than ever before from Wisconsin. So a very exciting time.
Great opportunities. Well, with all these opportunities, there's never a panacea of great things. There's always the negatives. There's always challenges. There's always barriers. So what are those key barriers that you have to overcome to get another 25% increase in dairy exports?
Well, I think at a micro level, our Wisconsin dairy processors are really focused day to day on creating high quality food products. They're focused on making the cheese, on taking care of their employees, on supporting their largely rural communities where they operate. right? Exporting is something that I think a lot of dairy processors know they should consider, but they don't necessarily feel like they have the time to explore it. So the logistics and navigating global trade are daunting for them. And I think that holds a fair number of Wisconsin dairy processors back. I'm hopeful that new federal and state aid are going to help them get over that hurdle, right? These free export consultations, some seed money to support some new endeavors, I think are really promising. They're practical programs that will help them figure out what consumer preferences are overseas and match their product line to the right market, and hopefully execute some of the technical requirements, things like labeling and certifications.
Yeah.
But more broadly speaking, the dairy industry would benefit from increased trade negotiations and more work to protect common food names. You know very well, it's been more than a decade since the United States has entered into a new free trade agreement with a new trading partner. I think it was 2012 when we had FTAs with Korea and Colombia and Panama, and the TPP kind of fell apart. And dairy's done perhaps surprisingly well in spite of the fact that we haven't had new free trade agreements. But stagnation does have a cost over time. And so a lot of dairy processors at this point are calling on the administration and on Congress to try to expand trade promotion authority and also work to create new agreements in the future.
Yeah.
And within those negotiations, it's going to be critical that policymakers defend common food names, things like feta. Since 2009, the EU has worked to restrict the use of those kinds of names, and that ultimately limits American companies from marketing and selling overseas. So those are priorities for sure.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. The International Trade Administrator, one of the undersecretaries, Marissa Largo, was in Milwaukee a few months back, and she basically said Congress has no will to do any free trade agreements right now. And it's unfortunate
we'll
because
work with what we've got, but I think
Right.
that there's a long-term cost there.
Yeah, no, I think Sandy and I totally agree with this, is that free trade agreements benefit both parties, both countries, if not both populations, and job growth over time. Well, we're out of time. Rebekah, this is great information. It's a great export for dairy exports is fantastic, a leading industry here in Wisconsin and in the United States, and we really appreciate your participation on Talking Trade.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Rebekah. Thank you for joining us on Talking Trade.
You've been listening to Talking Trade, sponsored by MMAC's World Trade Association and Michael Best Strategies.